We'll see. We'll see. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's 4:30, so we will begin our Moorhead Public Service Commissioner meeting, dated September 12th, 2017. It's 4:30. So I believe the first action would be call to order. And with that being placed, I believe the next item on the agenda is the election of officers. So this is where you can take over and tell us what we need to do. I believe we have a nomination. Is that what we have? Okay, so the first position would be the replacement for Ken Norman as president. If there is anybody who would like to make a nomination at this time, please do so. If not, if not, I was going to say we have had discussion here in the past as far as what we would do, and I would think it would be appropriate for you to make a nomination if you would choose so.
For president, I would nominate Dave Anderson.
Okay. All righty. Any other nominations to be heard? If none, we will make a vote. Make a call for a vote.
Yes.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Congratulations, Mr. Anderson. You now can take over the meeting. That's the way I'm doing it.
You're doing such a good job.
Shall we move? Oh, you got it, Bill?
Yeah.
We'll move you around.
Yeah, we'll move you over.
This feels really weird.
We just did the generic 1 through 4 at large.
Oh.
In case you never knew that was my.
Oh, I was just wondering that.
All right.
Did you want to leave secretary as is?
Maybe not.
Okay.
We'll talk.
Okay.
All right, well, hello, everyone. This feels weird. Thank you very much for your confidence, by the way. I do appreciate the opportunity. I have enjoyed the 5 years that I have been here serving. It's been 5 years, I think, last month. So we have a few years under the belt, but thank you. We'll do our best to serve the community well. And Cheryl, welcome officially up to the desk. It's great to have you with us. And John, thank you for opening the meeting and getting us started. Chris, thank you for being sitting over there way at the end of the, you can slide over if you like. Yeah. It's 3-1. So now. Next up would then be, I believe, we might want to talk about this just a little bit, but currently the secretary is Ralph. As we all know, Ralph has some challenges getting here for meetings due to his job responsibilities. Actually, today he had expected to participate via telecommunications, but he is in Florida assisting family in their response to all of the monster mess that's going on down there. So, but as we go forward, I think it might be wise for us, because of business that comes to this desk every couple of weeks that needs the attention of the president and of the secretary, that we might want to consider a change in that role. I'd throw that open to you all to react, but Ralph and I have not talked about this, so he does not know that I'm even mentioning this. It didn't occur to me till 5 minutes ago, but we might want to talk about it. Anyway.
I think it makes sense, but without having input from Rolf at this time, maybe we can just continue for this month.
We'll leave things in place.
And see what his thoughts are, if it's going to be difficult where he is going to continue having challenges or via teleconference. Yeah. It may be something that we would want to put on the agenda for next month and see what his input would be. If Bill, if you could touch base with him and
I sure can.
See what his thoughts are. If he'd have a preference, then I think we then would make the meeting next time to make that change if we were going to do so.
And John is the alternate secretary, so he can sign for Ralph today, so.
So we're covered. You know, I mean, we do have people in place, so, yeah.
So-
Without objection, then, we move on, not do anything further with elections at this point, and go into the regular agenda. Okay. Well, then, next, I would call for a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda?
We have a motion?
I'll second it.
Got a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Everybody likes the agenda, okay. The consent agenda, a couple of changes that I might suggest before we go to approve the consent agenda. I think it would be very helpful for us to go ahead and discuss the regional electric rates. That's something that I think is actually a fascinating topic, but also we have a couple of members that have not ever participated in that conversation. So I think we ought to take that one off. And then we had talked about even removing the safety management program, but that might be worth going through too. We have an investment in that, and again, Joe, you know, if you're going to be able to fill us in a little bit about that, I think it'd be good for the newer members then to hear about the safety management program too. So we were going to slide that one maybe over to consent, but I think we're going to just keep that right where it is. So with that, can I get a motion that would revise the consent agenda just a little bit?
Just a clarification here, there's one item on the bills
Oh, okay.
that I don't know if we would need to remove the bill paying to the consent, off the consent, or if we could come back to old business, just get clarification.
Is it on the current bills?
It's on the current bills. There is $1,500,000 for wastewater pass-through.
Why don't we just remove it from
Yeah,
consent?
just
then?
remove it,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about it.
And we'll talk about it. Okay, all right.
Okay, all right.
So can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion to proceed with the consent agenda as written.
As revised?
As revised, excuse me.
Okay. A second? Got a second? All in favor? All opposed? Motion is approved. So we move on to the bills. So we can come right back to your point.
All right. Just for clarification with the item here for $1,500,000, wastewater pass-through, could we just get an explanation of what that item is for our benefit?
Nancy Lund, Administration and Finance Manager. Moorhead Public Service provides billing services to the City of Moorhead and includes a number of city charges on the MPS utility bill, including things like sanitation, recycling fees, wastewater, stormwater, pest control, Dutch elm, street lighting fees. So there's a host of charges from the City of Moorhead that are included on our bill. And we bill it and we collect it, and this is the monthly payment to the city for all of those fees for the billing services that we perform for them. So the revenues that they're collecting based on their fees, their charges, is paid out to them monthly. So $1.5 million annually that we do bill and collect for the City of Moorhead.
Did you say
Monthly.
Monthly, I'm sorry, monthly.
Okay, all right. And as far as when we have write-offs, as far as well, so I'm assuming part of those write-offs then would be a part of those fees. Is that then reduce the amount of transfer then? So it comes out as net?
Yes, it does. And for example, you will see, you know, the other part of this action is to approve the uncollectible accounts list too. And so when we do those write-offs, or what we actually do is we write off accounts that people have moved out of town, left the area, aren't paying their bills. We do have you approve the write-offs, and we do that by service. So at the bottom of that printout, you'll see the dollars that are affected for electric and water, our Moorhead Public Service, the wastewater and sanitation, our City of Moorhead. And so those fees are deducted from the net cash that is forwarded to the city each month.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Nancy, while you're up there, would you, for the benefit of the newer members, just give us a little brief rundown on the uncollectibles and the effort that is made before we determine that they're uncollectible?
Sure, okay. So these accounts are people that have lived in Moorhead and have moved out and left us. You know, for the most part, as you look through the uncollectible list, you'll see, or the information that's provided is an account number, a dollar amount, an address, and the date that they left Moorhead. And you'll see from looking at that list that, you know, the majority, I'd say 75% of those write-offs have apartment numbers within the service address. So they are, for the most part, rental units. And they've left the area, moved maybe just to Fargo or whatever. But once a customer moves from Moorhead, they receive 2 to 3 letters, so collection letters asking them to pay their bill. And they do get, I think, a couple of phone calls too. So we use an automated phone calling system that calls and reminds them to make their payment. And then we eventually, I think about 60 days out, normally we will turn those over to a collection agency to continue collections at that point. So at that point, we do write them off of our accounts receivable. So as you see our financials, they're no longer included in our receivables from customers. But if we turn them over to the collection agency, they continue to work those accounts, and anything they collect, they turn a portion of that back over to us.
Thank you.
Any questions, further
No, that actually.
further concerns? Or?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the question that I had, and I appreciate it.
I
Okay.
just thought the list looked particularly long this week.
You know, what we've probably got here is the June move-out, so, you know, 60 days afterwards. So what you're probably seeing is the outflow of a lot of rentals, and which might include college students leaving in the spring. And so spring is probably our largest time that we have those write-offs. So it kind of corresponds with the moving in and moving out that happens too. So we have a lot of moving out activity at the end of May, first part of June.
What a terrible generalization. I have 2 college kids living in my house.
Sorry about that.
Just
John, go ahead.
for further clarification, Bill and I talked on this briefly as far as with the amount of apartments. Have we researched what impact we would have if we would require a deposit to be made by rentals? That may be not appropriate, but have we even looked into that area? Because when you look at, I didn't go through the numbers, but I'm guessing you must be looking at 70% of losses here appear to be apartments, and I think that would be pretty consistent through here. So it may be not appropriate, but we should maybe at least discuss it or look into it if we haven't.
We do. We look at those policies and those practices quite regularly, and particularly we have looked at that process. We used to collect deposits up front from anyone that could not provide us with a good credit history from another utility. So that we did it's been many years ago that we started that process. What we found, our write-offs are really very minimal compared to our revenue stream, and past history on that would show that we probably spent more time and effort and negative energy collecting those deposits up front than the write-offs that we prevented. So yeah, we probably did that process back in the late 80s into the mid 90s, and it was not a popular program. So it kind of sets a negative connotation for customer service connotation from the start of the process. And we've reviewed it, but you know, with our low write-offs, we would probably spend more pursuing that collection process than we write off annually.
This includes a significant dollar amount for the city as well. Do we discuss that regularly with city folks, finance folks there? Because we're collecting their money as well, or not collecting their money as well.
Correct. I don't recall we've had a conversation. You know, we do relay billing and collecting information to them monthly, but we just net the uncollectibles out, so we have not had that conversation with them about detail on those dollars.
Something, Heidi, what do you think? Something that we ought to be touching base on at some point? It never occurred to me that until the last month or so, that we weren't just talking about electric or water here, that we were talking about, this is the whole bill. And so, you know, it is wastewater, it is it is the garbage collection, it's all the various fees. And so we have a shared investment here with the folks at the city.
Correct, and probably that average utility bill for those apartment units that we're talking about is probably about $45 worth of electric and water, and about $55 worth of City of Moorhead charges, so that's kind of the mix there.
Yeah.
And so it does impact them, but I'm guessing because they're not used to seeing, they're used to seeing the net, so I would guess they're not real aware of those write-offs, but I'm not sure that there's another process that they could put in place that would impact that.
I don't know, maybe, for the rest of the group, for now, maybe between now and next month at this time, we just touch base. It might be worth visiting with our friends at the city about it, to see if they're satisfied with our level of aggressiveness in collecting, or whether we're talking about an amount here that isn't that significant. But when you look at it from month to month, it becomes quite a pile of money.
Mm-hmm. Sure, I can have that conversation with city finance,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it would definitely be you need to look at the cost-benefit ratio to see
Sure.
how much staff time is involved, and does that outweigh,
Right.
or does, is there money or assets to be gained by the amount of
Yeah.
staff work?
What's our 12-month write-off? When you accumulate these, what are we talking about at the end of the year?
Boy, I would have to go back and look at that number. Overall, I think it's less than 1%. I want to say
Is
it's
it?
like 0.2% or something like that
Oh, okay.
of electric revenue. So in the overall, realm of our revenues, it is a small amount. It may seem substantial, but overall, it's not a huge amount.
Well-
We're well below, industry. So American Public Power Association would list out numbers of average write-offs and things like that. We are well below those industry standard numbers for write-offs.
And Nancy, do most, or do other utilities, municipal utilities require deposits for apartment dwellers, or is that something of the past? You mentioned credit rating, but what do other cities do?
It's there's a variety of different things. I've talked to some of the local utilities and some of the other larger MMUA, Minnesota Municipal Utility Association members in the last 2 months, and one bit of information I did find that was surprising is there is a local provider within our area that is requiring deposits from rental units upfront. So they're just making that part of their process. I'm not sure if they're allowing a customer to pay it over the first 2 to 3 bills or something like that, but
Yeah.
they have gone back to that practice of collecting those deposits upfront.
Okay.
I would appreciate if we would do a little research on that, even though it's a low percentage. If you're looking at $250,000 to $300,000, that's a significant number that with the budgets that we're going to be looking at, anything that we can potentially eliminate as far as expenses would be beneficial. So we can just do some research and then respond back as far as what options are available here. And then I'm
Sure.
thinking that would be a city and the utility joint discussion for it.
Okay,
Okay,
we do
thank you.
have, actually, we have our customer service information from American Public Power, so that's a good resource to start with. And we have done some of those local surveys too, so we'll get that information put together.
Good.
Chris, did you have anything?
No, I just
Okay.
was observing that it seemed like it was a particularly high amount.
Yep, okay. Anything else, folks? I'd entertain a motion then to approve the bills and write-offs.
I'll make that motion.
As second?
Sure, second.
Got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Let's move on. Customers to be heard. Anybody out there in audience land? I think we're all staff here. It looks like the same group of faces. You all don't get to see who we get to look at, but we look at them every week, so, yeah. Old business. Any old business to be discussed? Usually I look at John for that because he usually has old business.
I'm wondering if Chris might want to give an update as far as his journey to Crookston and presentation, if he could just give us some highlights and any good information that you discovered there.
Chris Knutson, Water Division Manager. Yeah, so it was an interesting opportunity to get to talk about water quality throughout the state. The state is doing a program called 25 by 25, and the general goal is to improve water quality throughout the state by 25% by the year 2025. So I had the opportunity to speak at that conference. All the commissioners of the various state departments were there. The governor was there. I talked specifically about some of the things that we're doing to protect our source water from contamination, how we keep drinking water safe by doing source water protection. Talked a lot about the different partnerships we have with Clay County and trying to preserve the Buffalo Aquifer as an important drought resource for Moorhead. So working with the state in terms of grants that we do with the state, and then working with Clay County in terms of some of the protection that they provide in terms of zoning. So talked a little bit about those items, but just got to talk to some other city folks and some just general citizens about how municipalities and utilities can work together with other agencies to improve water quality throughout the state. So a really lively, interesting conversation. About 200-300 people there, so good group, and got to meet the governor. So that was
Good.
Chris,
Oh, go ahead.
any discussion about the litigation of White Bear Lake against DNR?
I did get a chance to talk to Commissioner Landwehr about that discussion, and without kind of really diving into the weeds about details regarding that litigation, I think generally for more public service, the DNR is going to be more focused on permitting processes for groundwater. So they're going to be, I think, a little bit more stringent as a result of that decision. What does that mean for us? I think that means we need to get going on getting our groundwater permits secured for our future well field on the Buffalo, because I think the DNR is going to be looking more closely at groundwater permitting. And just as a background, basically the DNR was sued by the White Bear Lake Association, and the DNR lost the lawsuit. So they're going to have to do a bunch of measures to kind of restore the lake, and they're going to be looking at groundwater permitting really hard in that particular area. But I think statewide, you're going to start to see some pretty significant changes in terms of groundwater permitting, some things that we need to be aware of. So I did get a chance to talk to Commissioner Landwehr for a good while about that decision.
Chris, do you have any concerns about the water quality report that came out recently on the Red River?
I do, and that was one of the things I only had a couple minutes to speak, but generally we're really concerned about water quality of the Red River. For us, it's a lot tougher to control because it's impacted by a variety of sources. It shares the state line. It's difficult for us to have a ton of impact on that, but we've noticed that there are significant water quality concerns on the Red River, and when the water quality on the Red River degrades, it costs us more money to treat. So when we experience poor water quality from the Red River, we use about 80% of our water from the Red River. It costs us more to treat that water when the water quality is poor.
And that has budget impacts for us then as we look at the future. And if that water continues to degrade, then that just means that we're going to spend more money treating water.
Correct.
Would that cause us to just thinking out loud a little bit? Would that cause us to start to draw on the aquifers more regularly, or what would be the result of a continuing deterioration if that were to be the case?
That's a fantastic question. The answer is complicated. I think, our past practice has been to utilize the aquifer as a drought resource, and I believe we would want to continue to do that.
Yeah.
And in doing so, you know, we'd continue, I think, even though Red River water quality is getting worse, we're going to continue to use that. We're just going to be spending more money to treat that poor quality river water. So I think, you know, periods we may use a little bit more aquifer water, but I think we generally, you know, our operation has been to preserve that for drought resource, and that we'd probably continue to want to do that.
Our two governors are going to get together to talk about the diversion. Maybe this would be a partnership opportunity for them to talk about how it is that we could work together to work on preserving the red as opposed to
Right.
continuing to see it deteriorate.
Yeah.
Yeah. We could pass that along, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Heidi.
John?
One more question.
John has one more, and then Heidi does, so.
Heidi?
First.
Go ahead.
Well, speaking for Rolf, a sludge update from that meeting?
Sludge I didn't get a chance to talk to the MPCA commissioner, but Bill and I have been working on the sludge issue, and we're hoping to have a report early October about kind of our next steps forward. I believe we have some next steps. We've looked at a variety of different options, so we've been working on it in the background, but and I think we have something we're going to be bringing something in October for action.
Cheryl,
regarding
that's
the
a
sludge
whole
issue.
meeting about sludge, by the way, you know, so we can't catch you up tonight on that.
All right.
Thank you.
Anything, Heidi, you had one.
Thank you. Chris, as you're aware, the MPCA has talked about changing allowable limits of phosphorus and nitrogen and whatnot for cities.
Right.
Which is a point source, we can control that.
Right.
But it's all the non-point sources that you can't control. What was talked about, or was that talked about there in imposing these new regulations on border cities is Breckenridge, East Grand, us?
That wasn't talked about specifically. I would say the focus of the meeting was actually more in terms of an agricultural context. What can we do on the ag side to preserve water quality? But certainly that's part of what PCA is looking at, and part of the reason, they're looking at phosphorus is that trying to meet that 25% goal by 2025. That's not specifically laid out in that broad gesture, but I think it's kind of part of the overall discussion is that, yeah. And you're right, certainly non-point sources are a big contributor to phosphorus.
Yeah, agricultural runoff and fertilizers and whatnot. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else on old business? All right, nothing to take action on there. Reports, City Council, Heidi, you're up.
Yes, thank you. I guess the big item I would just call everybody's attention to is that the city passed our preliminary budget, property tax levy. All the information is at our website. There's a shortcut actually posted on our website.
Oh,
so
cool.
that details more specific information. I think it's a good budget. It's, any increases are fairly minimal. When we look at our neighbor to the west, it's
It's a bad
looking
day.
good over on this side of the river, and it feels good for one budget cycle. It's like finally, it's them, not us. But
Yeah, yeah.
Chris is in the audience if anybody has any specific questions, but like I said, all the information is on our webpage.
I don't believe we need to call Chris up to discuss anything today, but no, I read the paper with interest this morning, especially given the actions on the other side of the river as well. And talk radio today was a buzz, so I'm glad they weren't talking about us.
Yeah, exactly,
So,
right?
yeah, all right. Public Service Commission, any members with anything to report, talk about, bring to our attention? We're going to be bringing a lot to your attention as the evening goes along. So, General Manager, Bill.
Just a couple of things on the written report and then a couple of things off of the written report. One thing is the reminder that this Thursday is the Oakport Water Tower celebration. And if you can make that, that's from 4 o'clock to 6 p.m. at M.B. Johnson Park. I'll be traveling, so I will not make it back, most likely by 6 o'clock. But I know our staff will be there, and
I'm trying to get there.
okay. So, I mean, there'll be some presentations, and they'll talk about the tower, and they're going to have free music and some of that kind of thing. And the public is invited to come to that as well. So if anyone in the public hears this and wants to go, or is it on our website? I don't know if it's on our website. Kind of on our website.
Public meeting notice that went out, so all of you can go.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Yeah. Chris, can we see the water tower from MB Johnson? I thought it was an interesting selection of space for the celebration, because I'm not sure that I can see the water tower from there, but.
You can't see the water tower from MV Johnson, but actually you wouldn't be able to see, even if you were there. You wouldn't.
Shrouded,
It's
isn't it?
shrouded right now with a curtain, containment curtain. So we knew it was going to be close. We had a tough timeline to hit it with construction, and we're about a week or so behind because of the number of rain days we had here in late August. So unfortunately can't hit the deadline for the event, but it'll still be nice weather, it looks like. So that's one positive.
Timeline on the completion of the painting of the water tower.
Yeah, it's looking like it's going to be about 2 weeks or so from now. So we should have it fairly shortly here. They've been making really good progress on it. So I think it'll look pretty sharp. So.
Well, I hope they have a good turnout Thursday night. I'm trying to get there, and this will be the unveiling then here in a couple weeks then of the artwork that was high on everyone's attention list here a couple of months ago as we were discussing, what was going to go up on this thing. So,
And generally,
So
we'll be talking budget, of course, in the next couple of meetings, but Woodlawn is scheduled for next year, and so we'll have to start thinking about what we want Woodlawn to look like, and if we want to go through a similar public input process to what was done on Oakport. So we'll finish one, and then we'll have to pick the next one up right away. So just something to think about.
can't wait. And I'm sure Chris is probably willing to work with that group again.
My passion,
It's her passion.
water tower art.
All right, Bill, anything?
Just a couple other things. You'll see a thank you note from the city of Detroit Lakes. We had linemen crews that went to Detroit Lakes after a windstorm this summer and helped out. And that's a segue into the update that we have sent 4 linemen down to, and I think they say Kissimmee, Florida, right? And 4 linemen down there to help out some municipal utilities in that area with the Hurricane Irma. They should be gone for about 7 to 10 days. And they're with a caravan of other municipal utilities in the state of Minnesota. I also heard on the radio that Xcel is sending crews down to help out the investor-owned utilities there, and so is Otter Tail Power. So Joe can probably provide you with a little bit more of an update in a future item here when we talk about safety. But we have 4 linemen, and just so I get their names out there, there's lead lineman Ryan Nelson and Paul Steffens, and then lead lineman Adam Victoria and lineman Don Rollick. So, and we just keep them in your thoughts. And
Bill, talk to us about the process that occurred via the Minnesota utilities in order to generate this person power that is down there. I think the folks would like to know, how it is that we're able to pull resources from here in order to respond to that. It's the right thing to do. I'm not questioning really at all that. But we are a citizen-owned utility, and I think it'd be good for folks to understand how it is that we were drawn into this recovery effort to help neighbors to the south.
We're part of about 128 municipal utilities in the state of Minnesota that have municipally owned electric utilities. And I'll have Joe talk a little bit about the mutual aid pact that we have with that association, and how this, this agreement that we have allows us to do these things together. Because there's probably about a dozen trucks that are heading down from Minnesota, I'm thinking. So if Joe Moore, our electric operations manager.
That's correct. We are a member of the MMUA, which is the Minnesota Utilities Association. Actually, I believe there's approximately 40 trucks that are going down. It was a large caravan that went down. And typically what they do is with being part of this mutual aid and the different utilities in the United States and the weather-related incidents that we've had, typically they wouldn't come this far north, especially for Florida. But with what happened in Texas and all the people they sent down there and who are still there, they had to go farther out. So that's when the phone call came in last Thursday night, and he asked, Mike Willits with MMUA asked that we think about sending somebody down, and I talked to Bill right away as soon as it was possible, and agreed that yes, we would be able to send somebody down. When I was first contacted, he was thinking that we would be heading down the following week, like Thursday or Friday, and then the very next morning with the strength of the hurricane, they wanted to do some preliminary stuff and get as close as we could to get in there as fast as they could. So it was kind of thrown together from Thursday night to Friday morning, and the guys took off at approximately 10 o'clock on Friday morning and made it to Rochester, spent the night, and then from Rochester they went to Kentucky, and then the next day they ended up in Cartersville, Georgia, I believe, where this morning then they took off from there to Kissimmee, and we're hoping, I haven't talked to them yet today, but they were hoping to get there by about noon or so, and then just a rough idea of their set hours, they'll work from 5 in the morning until 9 at night. And try to get as many people back on as they can.
Any questions? Heidi, I believe you have.
Yeah, I had some questions. I too wholeheartedly think that it was a wise decision and it was the right thing to do. I just had a couple questions and concerns. I know that it was thrown together very quickly, and there wasn't a whole lot of time to communicate with everybody. But I feel like there were a lot of council people who were left out of the loop, and we didn't have accurate information, and I wasn't in a position to share anything last night. Another council member shared some information, and I wasn't sure how accurate it was because it was Facebook information. So I really was concerned about that communication. And it also would have been a great opportunity, and it's an opportunity that hopefully isn't lost, for some media attention. Because those guys, and all those guys and gals who are going down there to help, deserve to be recognized. So I'd just like to see in that type of situation that those lines of communication tightened up. Even though it was so spontaneous and at the last second, there's got to be a way that we can make sure everybody is kind of in the
If
in
I
the
can,
loop.
the original intent with the notification, with it being a week later, was to talk to the commission tonight
Yeah.
and get the approval and get the okay and let everybody know.
Right, and that's what I had assumed too.
And then so from Thursday night to Friday morning, it was getting forms filled out, getting the guys ready. They had short notices to their families.
Right.
It was like, we got to get our ducks in a row right now. And even as they were going, I was still sending information down to them, with the liabilities and the insurances and the equipment. And so it did come together very fast.
Yeah, and that I understand. But hopefully we don't have situations like this again.
Definitely.
But like, Dave said, it's inevitable that we'll experience these types of situations. And from this, hopefully we'll learn that we can better communicate with the whole group.
Yeah, and we haven't sent a press release out yet, but the guys are just getting to Kissimmee right now.
Right,
they
today
got
it
there
will
at
be
1
their
o'clock
first
today.
workforce.
So, really, now is when the work starts. So, we should be able to do a a press release, talk about the guys that we've sent down there, and really, yeah, make sure and get the information out there so people are thinking about them.
Yeah.
And they were hoping to send pictures. We're still not quite sure what they'll be able to get in and out with cell service. So that's all up in the air right now. So we're kind of in limbo right now.
Right, and I'd heard some information about they couldn't find gas, and then they weren't allowed into the state of Florida so, yeah, it just sounds like a crazy story.
I think they have the fuel covered for now.
Okay.
They were able to secure some fuel. They had the rooms secured. I know they had that. So the rest is kind of up in the air right now. So we're kind of in the dark right now, too.
Okay.
Bill, it might be helpful as we look to the future, because there will be other episodes. We may be one of those that'll be beneficiary, but maybe what we ought to do is understand a little bit more as a commission the mutual aid pact and really how that works and how it triggers. Is it an administration decision to spring, or is it something that should come to the commission in order to enable our reaction to the request? It was a weird weekend for all of us too, because Ken's term was up on the 1st. we didn't have a person in this chair, and then overnight we go from a week's notice to 14 hours notice. So a lot of things piled up against us here on this one. But I think it'd be really helpful, because I don't, this was first I heard of the mutual aid pact in the formal sense, and it might be good for us to all understand how it is.
We can review that. It'd be timely to get it in front of you as a report, or if there needs to be any changes to it, we can make changes to it. Because I'm not sure, Joe and I talked about that was it Friday? When we were talking about this, and we were wondering, okay, do I have the administrative authority to send these guys to Florida, or do we have to get a special commission meeting or that type of thing? So really, we intended to update you at this meeting and basically ratify the action if I don't have that authority already. So I made sure and got the information out to the commissioners so that at least they're aware of it. So.
Well, and I took it, upon myself to send a quick note to the mayor, and it was really a quick note, just to let her know that we had personnel that were going, along with a lot of other people from the state of Minnesota, to help out with this. So, in a very brief text, I believe I sent the mayor a note about that. So, but from here on out, we can talk about the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have a mutual aid agreement that the commission has approved that we can bring back so we can refresh our memory of how that works.
Yeah, let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, thank you very much for the explanation.
Thank you.
Is that?
Thanks, Joe.
We're good there. Anyone else?
Joe, one more comment too, and Joe might know the answer to this question. Don't we have to have that mutual aid agreement in order to get FEMA reimbursement?
Yes, you do have to have that. So and of course, more than likely, it's going to be declared a FEMA disaster. But yes, you have to have that. There's a lot of paperwork, and there again, to get your ducks in a row to make sure that that's all done before this is ever started.
Right. Yeah.
And then with it being declared a disaster area, FEMA will then reimburse all the costs
That's correct.
to the utility. I'd love to see more information on that pact. I think it's very interesting. I'm intrigued. I think
Well,
it's
and the
very
risk-
valuable. I'd just like to know more.
Yeah, the risk would be, if they don't declare it a disaster, I just sent 4 guys down there on Moorhead Public Services nickel, but you could pretty much see that this is going to be a natural disaster, so.
Sure it is.
I can say this, when Detroit Lakes had that storm and they had such widespread outages, there again, we got the call and asked if we could send anybody. I believe Detroit Lakes reimbursed us, and that was not considered a disaster.
Right. Yeah. John, you appeared to have a question.
Well, I was just going to make that clarification here that Bill already covered here. And also, I think it's important to note that a reason why we could send people is because of the fine work that was done on Oakport, where we had staff available to
We were
do it.
very fortunate that we got that done about a week and a half early.
So again, that's credit to the staff to have gotten that done as timely as they had for us to send the assistance that we could.
Good, I'll just tag on to the end of that, good news, bad news, right? I don't know if Travis wants to come up and talk about this, but we got the Oakport job done, you know, so we have a opening here where we do have some resources available to send to Florida, but we do have a issue with the 20th and 21st Street transmission line and distribution lines that this fall are going to have to be moved. So we are going to be working on that project, and don't give away anything that you can't give away, but give away whatever you can.
Hang on, just a second, Travis. Joe, when you communicate with the guys that are down there, just let them know that we all really appreciate what they're doing and how they're representing us down there, and we're proud that they were able to step up and do that. So please pass that along from all of us.
I'll do that. And we had actually more volunteers that would have gone.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
And there again, we have to limit to what we do and take care of business back here too.
Right, okay. Thanks, Joe. Travis.
Travis,
Even though we don't really want to hear from you.
I know. So, it's always expensive.
Yeah, it is.
Travis Schmidt, Electrical Engineering Manager. Over the past few weeks, we've been working on trying to finalize some details with the 21st Street grade separation project. We were looking for some details on locations and how the stages are going to occur with that construction project, because it is a 2-year project. In looking through all the stuff, there is a couple of conflicts that we have with the existing transmission line, and that it will conflict with what they're calling the shoe fly, which is basically a roundabout way of getting around it so they can put a bridge in place for the 21st Street grade separation. So we are working on getting stuff finalized on that so that we can start going out for bids for materials, hiring a contractor, and also working on some of the distribution that has to be relocated for that project as well too, so that everything can be completed, because anything that is on that transmission line will have to be adjusted before they start any of that construction. So that will be coming forward to you in the next probably few weeks.
Did I see a hand go up there, John? Looked like you were ready to go for something. Chris?
I have a question. How does this impact us financially?
Right now, we're still working through the route that we're going to take. We've got it pretty much down to 1, maybe 2 different options. For the transmission line, that's, of course, is the largest cost that we're going to have. Top end of that cost would be about $1.4, $1.5 million. Some of the routes would be a lot less than that. So we're just working through some processes. We're actually going to be meeting with the Moorhead Public School District next week to talk about a placement of the line in their area. So once we have more of that information, we'll be able to finalize the route that we've got. And then we'll know more on what the costs are going to be.
Just clarification, is that expenditure going to be all made in 17, or is it 17, 18?
It's probably going to be a 17, 18 combination expenditure. We'll probably get a lot of the distribution taken care of this year, and that's going to roughly cost about $300,000 or so, maybe a little bit more than that. We'll do what we can to get everything off that line, and any of the other minor adjustments we can take care of, then finalize the rest of that distribution stuff next year. The transmission, I would guess, is going to be probably more of an 18 because of the lead times it takes to get the structures in and get everything in place and the materials ordered. So, but we'll have to have that all done probably by May of next year, I would guess.
Travis, is this one of the costs that might have been shared had we been more involved early on with
Correct.
with the state participation and so forth?
Yep, and we're still working with the city on that, trying to figure out if we'll see some type of reimbursement on that.
Okay.
Bob and I have talked several times. Bill's been involved a little bit as well too. So we're trying to see what happens, and a lot of it really comes down to what the project cost is going to be and if there is some available funds for that. So we're still working through that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Cheryl? Chris, good? All right. Bill?
Nope, I'm done.
You're done?
Thank you.
You're not done.
Sounds good.
We took item D off of the
Oh, yes.
consent, and we'd like to talk about item D. Which is the regional, the report on regional electric rates. Our
Yeah, and-
competitiveness to the rest of the region.
Yeah, and I'll just maybe start. Dennis is coming up to the mic, and, we do this from time to time, really, whenever we see one of the utilities around our region that we compare against change their rates. We tend to throw a regional rate comparison report out to you. It's just interesting thing to do, and it happens from time to time. It's a complex process, actually, to pull together apples to apples comparisons on these rate studies, and Dennis does a great job pulling these together. So if you look back, we've got a number of these reports, probably a couple of per year over the past few years that we've done. We try to be pretty consistent with them. So with that, I'll have Dennis Eisenbraun introduce himself and kind of give an overview of the report.
Dennis Eisenbraun, Energy Services Manager. Excuse me. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our new Commissioner Dyson. Yeah, this is, the equivalent of kind of putting our finger up in the air to kind of catch where we are in relationship to the other utilities. What makes this difficult, what Bill was alluding to in making this comparison, is that if you compare our rates with rates of surrounding utilities, sometimes you may or may not get an accurate description of how we compare with them. You may look at another utility and you go, well, their rates are way lower than ours. How can that be? But then if you look at what is added to the bill when the customer receives a bill, there might be fuel adjustment charges, there might be conservation type charges. A lot of these things are added on that are not part of the actual published rate. So when we make this rate comparison that you see, what we do is I go through all the, as much information as I can find on these utilities and dig into everything that they add to their bills, including interim rate increases, and some of these utilities have that this year. And then so what I try to do is then put that all together. So if you had, use this many kilowatt hours in Moorhead, it would cost you a certain amount of money, and that would be one of the bars. But if you use that same amount of kilowatt hours at a different utility, how much would it cost there when you add in all of their other charges? Essentially what they have are unbundled rates, and our rate, everything is pretty much what you see is what you get. There are no extra charges. But some of these other utilities have, they have the base rate, and then they have all these other things that they add on to it later. It's not that it's wrong, or it's just a different way of doing it. But if you look at just the rate, you won't get the full picture. And that's what we do with these charts, is we put together all the numbers so you get a legitimate comparison of what you actually will write a check for at the end of the month or the year. So, and if you looked at the charts, we are the lowest for the primary metered customers, which is the really large customers, the Crystal Sugars, the colleges, that sort of thing.
Do you want to go through each one of them, Dennis, so that are on the screen there?
Okay.
Chart one.
The first one is residential.
Yeah, first is residential. So, here we are the second lowest. We used to be the lowest, but that has kind of been creeping up, and we are now, it kind of goes back and forth, but we're starting to stay not the lowest anymore. And there are a variety of reasons for that, but it is what it is. And I'm here to report numbers, not to talk politics.
We've seen that creep, though, over the last several years.
We have, right. And we've expected it, and it is now coming upon us. And it's actually, I think, if I'll get, my one statement is that it's probably come on us a little faster than we thought it would, but it's definitely here. But, you can see that we're still competitive, but we are not the cheapest. And, I mean, it just is what it is, so.
Casey, do you want to advance the next one? Go to small general service. We have 4 classes.
Right. Yeah, and this is something that that is a good thing at Moorhead Public Service. We have a fairly simple rate structure. The actual rates we have, they're inclusive rates, and we don't have a lot of classes, so it's easy for us to figure out who we are and what we're charging for things. The small general service, or the small general service class is exactly what that sounds like. It's like the gas stations, the sandwich shops, that sort of thing. And we are second in that class. So No,
Next one, Casey.
yeah, next one.
Please.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I meant to read something.
Okay, then the secondary general service customer, those are large customers who pay for all of their demand, and this would be larger store, grocery store type businesses, lumber yards, just larger businesses that use a lot more power. These people pay for all of their demand, and with the exception of, again, of the very large customers, this is a great many of our customers, and we're second for rates. So it'd be nice to be first, but we're second. So that's
And then
that.
one more, Casey. Got to show this one because we are lowest on this one.
Yay, this is where we win.
Hey, we're number
So
one.
this is our lowest, and this is where, for the largest customers, like the Pactives, the Crystal Sugars, and these are large companies that bring a lot of revenue into the city, and it's good that we are able to be very competitive with them. But, I'm afraid that someday we may move up to a second spot there too, but, that's just something we need to work with and continue to watch our costs, continue to make sure that we're as efficient as we possibly can, and we'll just do whatever we can to be number one in all categories. If it isn't rates, it'll certainly be in customer service, so.
Any questions for Dennis?
Maybe just one more comment, and it will come up during our budget discussion, either later in this meeting or in future meetings. Dennis mentioned that, we used to be the lowest cost utility in all categories, just like the one you see on the screen. But over the past decade, we've lost that advantage. And the reason for that is because we're growing, which is a good thing. But we have a fixed amount of power supply that we can get from our lowest cost power supplier, which is Western Area Power Administration, the federal hydro dams along the Missouri. We'd love to get more power from them if we could, but it's capped. So that is capped, and that's roughly 50% of our power. Everything else, so all the growth, energy, and power that we get for the growing city comes from Missouri River Energy Services. Great organization, good rates, they're just higher than Western Area Power. So it puts an accelerated upward pressure on our rates as we grow. And if we don't do anything really to adjust for that, we will just naturally be higher than everyone else because, we've just got a different cost structure. And it's, we've had an advantage for many years having a lot of our power supply coming from Western Area Power, and we're slowly losing that advantage as we grow. That being said, in the past, we've had a large city transfer, and I always talk about the city transfer, but I've got to educate.
Somebody has to.
Somebody has to. And it's 4 times the national average. And so it's about 21% of that blue bar that you see there. And so, there has to be ongoing discussions with all the leaders in Moorhead about, where we want to be on a competitive scale with our rates, and then how much we want to, transfer from the electric utility or the water utility for that matter, both of them, to the city. And I just think it has to be a conversation and understand that the reality is that as Moorhead grows, we're going to become less and less competitive. So I'm like the voice crying in the wilderness, because I think in 10 years, like Dennis said, this came upon us, even quicker than we expected, but we've been looking at this for the past 6-7 years. But in 10 years, where do we want to be? On this chart right here, do we want to be, the lowest like we are now, or second, third, or fourth? So I mean, that's a conversation we need to have. And like Dennis said, we're trying to keep our costs as low as we can. Our biggest cost is power supply, and there's not a lot we can do to control that cost. The second largest one is city transfer, and then after that comes all the other things that Joe does and Travis does and that type of thing. Anyway, there's there's the little sound bite, and I'll just keep talking about that, and we'll just keep having a conversation.
Well, and I'll just remind the group that we were successful here a couple of years ago in putting together what has been an ongoing agreement with the city council and the administration on transfer. We have another year to go in that agreement. We have more conversations to have about that. And as the Budget Committee gears up this fall, I'm sure that we're probably going to be discussing that again. I think over the course of the year, we need to be kind of constantly on that point, though, because we do have an agreement that's going to expire, and I think we have some details to work out. So,
Very good. Heidi, that's a question.
Heidi, did you have a question?
Yep, a couple things. What's unfortunate is that growth for you, for the utility, is not necessarily good, but growth for the city, residential, is excellent. It's too bad that, we can't, they can't be good at the same time. A question about WAPA. Who and why and how did that cap get put in place, and why can't we access more power from WAPA?
It's an interesting story, and I'll be as brief as I can, because we used to have a power plant that provided all the power for the city of Moorhead back in the 50s. And they actually built a brand new generator that they never really even used, because at the same time, Western Area Power, the federal government, the Bureau of Reclamation really was just completing these dams, and Moorhead had the opportunity to take they were marketing it around, and they said, how much do you want? And Moorhead said, we'll take as much as we can get. And so they took 100% of their power, they shut their power plant down, and they took 100% from WAPA. In 1977, the dams just couldn't produce any more power than what we grew into by the year 1977. So we actually had to get another power supply. The Moorhead plant actually provided power to Missouri River Energy Services for all their 60 members for the time period when they were building the coal plant in Wheatland, Wyoming. So that's an interesting side note. But Moorhead stepped up, said we'll take as much as we can get. They grew into it till 1977, and then from there they were capped. And when they were capped, they had to get all their supplemental from Missouri River Energy Services. And that's where we are today, so at that time it was 100%, or say 99% from WAPA and 1% from MRES. Now it's 50-50. So we've grown that much.
So as we continue to grow, that 50% will continue to chip away at that.
Yep. And we're 50%, so the power and energy from Missouri River Energy Services and WAPA is 50% each. But the bill we pay to WAPA and to Missouri River is 1/3 to WAPA and 2/3 to Missouri River Energy Services. So really, Missouri River Energy Services rates are about twice WAPA's. So that's, and like you said, we like growth. Growth is good. We love economic development, but it does put upward pressure on our rates, and we have to watch that.
And they're really only our only resource, the power resource.
Missouri River?
Missouri River.
Yeah, I mean, we
have long-term agreements there that bind us to them. Yep.
And we talk about collaboration. I mean, basically, we're collaborating with 59 other municipalities around the region, Detroit Lakes, Watertown, Brookings, and we all got together and built resources. One of them was a coal plant. They've also got nuclear. They've got Red Rock Hydroelectric project that they're building right now. So they've got a variety now, because that's, it's 40 years ago. So, and Tom Heller, the previous general manager here, is the CEO of Missouri River Energy Services.
Tom was with us a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
We shouldn't be so nice to him.
Well, yep. Well, there's not, I mean, I'm on the board of directors of the Missouri River Energy Services, and, they do and we do as much as we can to make sure that our rates are competitive. And if you look at a rate comparison like the one that was just on the screen, Missouri River Energy Services is very competitive in the region for a wholesale power supply. So it's just a reality. I mean, Moorhead is blessed to have as much WAPA power as it can, and then to have Missouri River Energy Services being as competitive as they are, because it gives you a big advantage. That's why you can have a 21% transfer, 4 times the national average, and still have, like Dennis mentioned, competitive rates. So, but all I'm saying is that where do we want to be 10 years from now? Because we have to have that conversation.
Anything else?
No.
I need a motion then, because I need a motion then to approve the report on rates. Anybody?
I'll make that motion.
All righty, Cheryl made the motion.
I'll second.
Got a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign. Thank you very much. Moving on down, next item, number 10, approve amendment to services agreement for Minnesota Municipal Utilities Association's Safety Management Program. Joe, you're back up. Let's be safe out there.
Yes. Joe Moore, Electric Operations Manager. This is a yearly renewal that we have with them, and it kind of stays the same from year to year. They've had some rate increases over the last couple of years to take care of their costs. We've been working with them pretty hard to keep it down, and this year, there again, since we're one of the larger cities in the group, we had a small increase above what the other utilities had, but I've been assured that they will be the same from now on. They're done adjusting their rates. There again, this is where we tie in with, they have 2 yearly schools, an overhead school and an underground school that we send our men to get them the safety training that they need. And there again, they meet with other people and learn what they're doing, and share ideas. So it's a very good situation. Plus the fact that they work with the legislators a lot, so we see a lot of things. They'll give us some notice of things coming down, whether it be from OSHA or state legislators, or try to give us a heads up. A couple of years ago, they helped us with an OSHA inspection, which helped tremendously. So there is a lot of benefit.
Worth the investment.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions for Joe on safety? Always a good topic.
I have a question for Bill. Since we participate in this, is this something that we could utilize to reduce any insurance costs, like a distracted driving discount, that we have this training and safety in place with our insurance or
Interesting
liability?
question. Nancy, can you answer that one? I'm not a...
Have we even asked the question?
I can ask.
Okay. Because it seemed to me that since you have this program in place, that having well-trained staff may give you some possible discounts.
Good thought.
Yeah,
We'll look into it.
it's worth asking.
Anxious to hear back.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Entertain a motion then to approve the services agreement with the Minnesota Municipal Utility Association Safety Management Program.
I'll make that motion.
Got a motion? Need a second?
I'll second it.
All righty. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Moving right along here. Golly, consent agenda took care of a lot of stuff. Okay. Item number 14, approve a task force order number 8 with KLM Engineering for additional structural repair work on the Oakport Water Tower. Back to the water tower.
Back to the water tower. Chris Knutson, Water Division Manager. We talked a little bit about how Oakport is progressing. During some of the sandblasting and recoating project, we identified some additional structural repairs that we need to take care of. This contract's a little different from normal contracts. Normally, we think of changes in scope for construction contracts being change orders. Again, going way back to December of 16, we actually have a different style contract here where we're working with the engineering firm that's overseeing the project. So it's actually a tank maintenance contract. So the contract adjustment we're making is actually with the engineering firm to achieve the changes in construction scope. So With that said, it's a relatively minor adjustment, $5,350 to complete some additional structural work associated with the project.
Right. Any questions for Chris on this item? Seems straightforward enough. Not a great expense. I'd entertain a motion to approve this task order number 8.
So moved.
Got a motion? Need a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. Item number 15 is to approve a change order number 1 and settlement agreement with Champion Coatings for equipment recoating at the water treatment plant. Chris, it's your night.
It is.
Yeah.
Kind of a long history on this one. I'll be brief in my summary. This is a project that started in 2015, and the overall scope was really to construct sandblasting and recoating of a lot of the metal components in our softening basins. So we actually started construction on this project in 2015, and now finally have a resolution to the contract. During construction, we encountered a number of difficulties with this particular contractor. You may remember back in February, we actually talked about the proposed settlement and what we were doing to achieve settlement with this contractor. We feel like we've come to a good resolution. MPS had about a little bit under $14,000 of hard costs associated with completion of the project. We wanted to make sure that MPS was made whole for those expenses. The proposed settlement is in the amount of $22,000, so basically a contract deduction in the amount of $22,000 to recoup both MPS's expense and the delay on the project, which was caused by the contractor Champion Coatings. So after a couple of years, finally want to put this contract to rest.
Staff is satisfied?
I'm satisfied with the outcome of the resolution. It's been a lengthy process to get there. John Balder has helped the negotiation process, and we feel it's a satisfactory outcome.
Any comments, concerns from commission members?
Is there a, for lack of a better description, an agreement of release parties from any future issues that have been drafted by John?
That's encapsulated in the settlement agreement. I believe it should be in the PSC only packet. So the settlement agreement lays out the terms of this change order and what the release associated with the project is. One of the critical things for us is not to release anything associated with the warranty period for the project. So indeed, that's the case. We're not releasing any warranty claims that may need to be made by Moorhead Public Service.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Anything further? Members? Bill, did you?
I was just going to say it's a good settlement, and it was settled on the eve of a day of mediation that everyone was going to meet in Fergus Falls. So it was nice to get that done, because that would have been additional cost to everyone. So, I mean, it was nice that Chris and John Bolger were able to get that accomplished.
Okay.
Can we avoid using this contractor again?
Well, yeah.
Or is-
I mean, really good question. So that's the reason we did the Oakport project the way we did. I kind of talked about how we have actually a contract with the engineer for that project, not the coating contractor. It's very intentional on our part to use a contractor that we feel is reputable and produces quality work, i.e. we're using what's called a tank maintenance contract instead of a traditional design bid build project. So we feel it's been a very good way to deal with some of the contractors that aren't it produces good quality work.
In the industry, it's very challenging to find painting contractors that live up to their expectations or their promises.
Sounds like an opportunity for somebody to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
While
But
everybody
it's,
else
yeah,
is.
it's not an understatement that many managers of utilities have been very frustrated with these types of issues.
And that's why state statute has actually changed to accommodate this type of, the arrangement we made in Oakport to recoat that project. They had to change state statute to allow for that type of contract.
So the 2 water towers that are going to be painted here in the next few years in Moorhead are not insignificant projects.
No, not at all.
Evidently not, yeah. Okay. Can I get a motion on item number 15?
Make that motion.
Second? Anybody? Got a second from John? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. On to item number 16, approving the revised 2017 commission meeting schedule. I can jump into this one a little bit. We have actually a short calendar in front of us, as it is now the middle of September, and we have a lot of work to get done between now and the end of the year. Cities ahead of us, they're already establishing their assessments and so forth. We have a budget to get finished up, so need to get a budget committee reestablished and to work. But that work then is dependent on our calendar and how we hit some dates in order to have our appropriate public hearings on rates, and then getting our work done, hopefully in sync and at the same time with the city and their budget process. So the dates that are presented help us accomplish that, and I'd be open to your discussion or your concerns about how that meeting schedule might impact you. October 24th is the date that we have established as the hearing. There is one item, I think, on our cycle of paperwork that I'd like to suggest a little revision to. We would receive the budget packet on the same day as the hearing. And if it's possible for the commission members to receive that budget a few days ahead of that hearing, I believe it'd really be useful for us to be able to review the budget a bit ahead of time, as opposed to receiving that packet on the same day. Other than that, I didn't see any other revision. That it just creates more midnight work for Nancy, and that's okay. So,
What's the rationale for having a meeting next week?
Part of the rationale is that Ralph was available that day and not the 24th. And then the other rationale was to complete the general manager's performance review. So, I mean, really, it's going to be like a planning meeting, but basically you'll be in executive session most of the time. And you have had several of those discussions, so it may be a short meeting.
it is a time when we're all here.
Right. Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
I have a conflict, but I'll
Yeah.
reschedule.
Well, just to clarify, Ralph had requested that he be here during the performance review, and this was initially brought forward in the first part of August, I think, so it's been pushed back, and this is the first opportunity for him to be available, so that was the...
Does that present significant hardship, Chris, for you?
No, I'll just try to reschedule the meeting.
Okay. No, if that's doable, and if we can all be here for at least that important meeting, as John indicates, we've been putting that off for a while. It'd be good to get that finished. So yeah, I'd like to get it done. And then the rest of the year, there are a couple of if needs there, and I believe we won't need those extra meetings, but to get the hearing done and in time in order for us to have the public approval process from that hearing forward to when we actually execute the budget for the coming year, we need to get that hearing done on the 24th of October. So, do we need to approve the meeting
Yes.
schedule? Do we? Okay, all righty. I'd entertain a motion if we're ready to go.
I'll make the motion.
Got a motion? Need a second?
Second.
Got a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign? With regret. Thank you for changing your schedule. We appreciate that. Now, doggone it, Ralph better get here from Florida. Ralph, wherever you are, we're thinking bad thoughts about you, so. All righty. Let's take a little bit of time yet. We don't want to go too long here, but can we take a preliminary look at the budget? I know that in a part of this section here too, we need to appoint a budget committee. I have been a member of the budget committee for 5 years. With this new role that I'm going to play here, I'm going to relinquish a seat on the budget committee, and I believe the person that would be prepared based on his experience over the last couple of years to step into that role would be you, John. We're leaning on you for a number of things, but hopefully we're going to relieve you from one or two as we go along here. I believe that's the only committee that we need to necessarily take action on this evening, but what we might want to do is talk about some of the other assignments along with the rest of the commission and where it is that we believe that we're all going to be able to best fit. So as you look at the list of committees, where it is that you might be able to slip in and provide us support, we can get into that conversation as we go a little further down the road. One of just a notion as we're looking at the committees, we have a thought of combining two of the committees into one, because we have a human resources committee and we also have a labor negotiating committee. It seems to me that could be a workforce committee and just combine the functions of the two. So, something to think about. It's a notion, but if you like the idea, maybe we can take action on that in a meeting or two as we set up the committees. John, your name's on there a lot with things like the Economic Development Authority, as well as those human relations things, and now we're going to slide you into budget. So you might think about where you might be able to let go of something as well. So let's think about that.
Well, just a question here, does, Budget Committee is always really exciting work. Does any of our other members have a specific interest in working with budget?
I just don't feel prepared at this point in time. I feel like I need another year to a full budget cycle. I came in October 1st of last year, and I didn't really see the whole big picture yet. So I wouldn't be comfortable stepping into that role. And I appreciate your willingness to do that, John.
Being as this is my first meeting, the second, what Chris has just said, I think I just even appreciate a little bit of discussion about what's involved.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Nancy's review can get us into that mode, so that we can really start to consider the kind of the bigger picture, the broader picture, and then I would welcome you, as we did. We welcomed John last year to sit in with us. We had to put out meeting notices because we had a quorum a couple of different times, but John sat in with us on the budget process a couple of different times last year, as Ralph and I were the committee. And I believe that would be very helpful. And you can see how it is, what the dynamics is of the staff working with the committee and pulling a budget together that eventually gets in front of the whole commission. So, yeah. So if you would like, we could probably make those arrangements. So.
Also, Bill, with that, I think Chris had requested that, and I had requested as a new commissioner to sit down with staff and get orientation, if you will, here. And I think maybe Chris still has some interest in hearing some of that as well. So if that could be arranged, I think that would be beneficial as well.
Sure. We've talked about that off and on, that it would be helpful to have those kinds of orientations.
Yep, sounds good.
And maybe even a staff meet and greet here, as far as to know who's all out there.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, with that, do we need to take action to appoint a committee, or is that?
You do? Yes, that's your action, and then to set the date for the rate hearing.
Okay.
So those two
first up,
actions.
can I get a motion to appoint a committee of, I believe we have consensus, Ralph and John, with the invitation for other members to participate in the process as they would care to.
I make that motion to include John and Ralph on the budget committee.
Okay? May I get a second? Got a second? All in favor? Say aye. All opposed, same sign? John's opposed. Well, he didn't say opposed, he waved a finger. So. Thank you, John, appreciate it. Thank you, Ralph, wherever you are, it still passes. All right.
That was unanimous.
Okay, we are unanimous with a finger waving. Then I would need a motion then to establish the rate hearing date of October 24th, 2018, or 2017. I'm jumping ahead a year already.
Yep.
2017, for the 2018 budget. So.
I'll make that motion.
And a second? Got a second? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, same sign? Okay, that takes care of the actions necessary.
Yep. Yeah, and Nancy can come up to the
Why don't we talk
podium
about it a
and
little
we'll talk about the agenda item here.
Okay.
And just a reminder that these budget committees are open, they're actually open to the public.
Yes.
And they're open to all the commission members. It used to be that it wasn't open to the public and we had 2 commissioners, and if we had 3, then it would be open to the public. We'd have to post it and all that type of thing. Well, since that time, after the city started their budget process, we did a little more investigating, and it's like that standing committee needs to be open to the public and it needs to be posted. So now we do that. So the good news on that is that any commissioner will be able to just come and be involved in those. So when you see the emails coming out for the budget committee, if you have time and you want to, you can certainly come to those meetings. So, and anyone from the public can come to those meetings as well. On the agenda item to review the preliminary 2018 budget, if you look at the item, it's very well written. We write it similarly every year. And in that first paragraph after the background, before Nancy starts, I wanted to just highlight 6 items that are very significant in our budget, and it just gives you a little preview of the things that we have to pay special attention to. And it's all in that paragraph, and I'm not going to read it to you, but it basically talks about the 2018 inputs. And we say such as, number 1, and I said that's a big one, purchase power costs. Number 2, transmission costs. That's a big deal. The number 3 is the Southwest Power Pool annual transmission revenue requirements settlement with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. That's number 3. And we've talked about that one from time to time. Cheryl is not up to speed on that one. We've closed the meetings to talk about pending litigation. That's a significant one, and Nancy can get into that one. And we will during the budget processes as well. Number 4, transfer payments to the city of Moorhead. It's a big expense, so we talk about that. And then comes operating expenses and capital improvements as 5 and 6. So if you wanted just a broad overview of what our budget is made up of, those are really the 6 areas that, this year anyway, we've highlighted as big areas to kind of concentrate on. Now I'll pass it over to Nancy Lund, and she can kind of go over some of the other issues.
Thank you. I will try to keep this a little high level too, as we do use the budget committee to go through a lot of detail. What I wanted to maybe start with was just on page 5 of 5, you'll see just the timetable for the budget process, and you'll see the timeline that we've laid out that culminates in the approval of the budget and the approval of the rates for 2018. So if the budget committee wants to know what they just got themselves into, here's kind of a look at what's going to happen. So the budget committee is appointed and the rate hearing date is set. Now what we will do, staff will is beginning to work at some of the inputs into the budget right now. So we'll be meeting pretty heavily staff-wise throughout the month of September and firming up things like construction projects in 2017. Where are we at? Did we spend more than we budgeted or less? So we'll be looking at where our financial position sits and is projected to be at the end of 2017. And we'll use that then as one of the first inputs into 2018. Where are we? Where's our cash? How much more do we have to raise? Do we have money left over? That goes as an input into the 2018 rates. The other component that we'll work heavily with during the month of September then is capital projects for next year. So extensions of services, putting water main, electric lines, distribution into any new subdivisions that are going in, any replacement of transmission lines, water lines, any of those lines that need to be replaced, that's another big capital project for us. And then any of the other capital projects that come along. So we look at those two things. Staff is working on those, and the accounting or finance department will be working with each of the division managers to try to get those inputs in place throughout the month of September. So with a shortened budget period, we're hoping that staff is ready to make those commitments during this month. So we'll start those staff meetings. What we would expect then from the budget committee is probably towards the end of September, and through the rest of the budget period, there will be probably 3 to 4 budget committee meetings where they will really delve into some of the details, look in detail at these capital projects and plans that we are putting in place for 2018 and forward. We do project our capital expenditures and our operating expenditures out a period of about 8 to 9 years. So of course, the farther out we go, the less perfect it is. It's never perfect, but we do try to look at the big picture, the long-term picture, when we look at rates and things like that. So the committee does a lot of that in-depth looking at things, and ultimately they will come back to you with a recommendation on budget and rates. And so that's kind of their role. The first meeting, or probably the end of September, early in October, we would engage that budget committee to come in and take a look at some items. October 10th is the first time that we would ask them to meet, if they're available, with our consultant who's doing our 2017 water rate study. So staff-wise, yesterday we spent most of the day with our consultant looking at the water division, their revenue requirements and rates, possible rates for the next 4 to 5 years. So we will ask that consultant to come probably an hour early to our October 10th meeting and be available to do an in-depth review of our water rate study. And then during our commission meeting, it will probably be a higher level review. But that would be the first opportunity for that budget committee to ask some in-depth questions on water budget and rates there. Throughout the month of October and then up to that October 24th date, we would plan to have that budget committee meet a couple times during that time period as we firm up our capital expenditures and take a look at other things like staffing. We're right now looking at staffing requirements, so there may be, an additional couple positions requested for staffing increases. And they'll work through those operating budgets. Operating budgets are normally a function of what the average has been in the last 3 to 4 years, and we build in an inflation factor and a compensation factor to add on to those. So those are not as intensely looked at as probably the capital budgets. So we do that. So probably budget committee 2 to 3 meetings in the next month to go over some detail there. That brings us up to October 24th, when we will strive to get that first budget binder ready that has all the budget information in it, from the high-level information. We talk about purchase power, we talk about city transfer, we talk about operating expenses, we talk about debt service and funding that, and we talk about reserves, and we talk about rates. And so all that, we would hope to have that ready for that October 24th budget or commission meeting, and then be able to go right to budget or to our rate hearing from that point. So we hope to accomplish cover a lot of territory in the next month on that. From that time period on, we would continue to engage the budget committee, and there might be a meeting or two between October 24th and November 24th, and then November 28th again, too, as items come up. That committee will be meeting a couple more times during that period to sometimes go back to the drawing table. So sometimes we come to the commission and they want that budget committee to take another look at some things, or they may want to challenge the staff and the budget committee to look differently and see if we can do something differently to affect rates or hold down those rate increases. So we'll continue to work with the Budget Committee throughout that process, and then December 5th, we would hope to have a budget and rate proposal in place, that's supported by the Budget Committee, and they'll be able to bring that back to the Commission and look at implementing or approving the whole budget and the 2018 rate increases. So that's kind of the process. And then I'll step back, so pretty intense process for a few months. Then I want to step back to the actual document itself, and you might ask the question, well, why haven't we got busy working on this already? And the primary reason we haven't done that yet is because there's too many pieces not fully in place yet. So as you walk through the agenda item here, we're covering a lot of territory, but the big numbers are yet undefined, such as, our total operating budget on the electric side is about $45 million. So the purchase power and transmission costs that we talked about a little bit earlier, so the Western Area Power and the Missouri River Energy Services, those two pieces together account for about 52% of our budget. So $45 million in revenue is going to go to WAPA and MRES, and to the tune of 2017 number was $23 million. So both of those entities have not yet finalized their 2018 rates. So it makes it hard for us to put together a final budget until they've actually taken those steps. The good news so far is, with WAPA, they are projecting a rate decrease. And what's happening there is for the last, I don't know if it's been 10 or 12 years, what they've had as a component in their rates is a drought adder. So there have been some significant costs that they've been incurring in the last decade related to drought. And what they're getting to now is they're getting to the point where they've recouped those costs and they're looking at eliminating a drought adder. So we could see a possible reduction or cost savings or reduction in WAPA bills of about 15%, which of a budget of $6.6 million would be about a $1.5 million reduction if it comes to reality. So a lot of activity still going on there. They've done their preliminary budgets, but nothing has been approved and firmly available to us to start our budgeting process with on that. So that's the first one that's up in the air. MRES has not finalized any budget. Budget information has not even gone to their board. General Manager Bill Schwant sits on that board, so we're waiting to hear that information coming from MRES to their board, and then it would become public information. So right now in this budget process, we are assuming a 3% overall increase from MRES, which is the information we had last year at about this time. So as they approved 2017 rates, that was their projection. So we'll be working with that number right now. If that comes to be reality, we'd be looking at about a $500,000 increase in MRES purchase power costs and SPP transmission costs. So about a $500,000 increase there. Again, undecided. We put the budget together based on the assumptions we have right now or what we think is going to happen there. The third piece in the purchase power and transmission is, what's going on with Southwest Power Pool. Again, WAPA joined Southwest Power Pool in October of 2015. We had some great hopes when that transition happened that we were going to be reimbursed for a lot of our local transmission costs. If you recall, or for those of you that weren't here at the time, we thought it was possible that we were going to be receiving about $3.4 million from SPP to help offset our transmission costs. Since October of 2015, MRES has represented us in negotiations with FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to look at our rate plan that was filed with them. And so as time has gone on, we've gone from $3.4 million to pay for transmission down to about $1.9 million. The main negotiating piece of that was that FERC was not accepting our 21% transfer that we've got here, and so that was cut down substantially. So from $3.4 million down to $1.9 million was where we were negotiating with FERC on that dollar amount. So that's had a substantial hit on our budget. Fortunately, we were looking at those revenues to help us build our reserves, so operationally, we're still okay. We have the potential for another $500,000 annual decrease in that number that we're thinking right now, too. So again, that number up in the air. We may have another $500,000 that we need to pay back to SPP, but we hope that comes, that number can be finalized in the next month or so, and we'll look at those numbers. So right now, the potential payback to SPP is $2.2 million. We're recognizing that in our financials, and we've got the cash set aside to pay it back, but it does impact, it's going to impact our budget. It's going to impact what we show as reserves on our financials too, but we are aware of it. We've been working with that within our budget process. So those numbers, so that $45 million in revenues, the $23 million in purchase power and transmission, not well defined as to what those costs are projected to be for 2018 yet. We'll keep working on that. That's the biggest piece in our budget. The second piece is the transfers to the city of Moorhead. So in 2018, we'll start out with a budget of about $8.9 million, so 21% of that $45 million will be going to the city of Moorhead for transfers. So that number is known thanks to the work of the group of four that crafted that transfer agreement. So a lot of times prior to that agreement, we were still waiting for the city to set their budget and try to figure out what that number is. So that number is a pretty solid number for us this year. And we would encourage that group to continue working on the next phase of the next 4 years of that transfer agreement to try to have something in place when the city begins their 2019 budget process early in 2018. So trying to keep about 1.5 years ahead of the city's budget process is where that needs to be, so that MPS and the city both have numbers for their budgets. Again, I appreciate the work that group has done. It's made our budgeting process easier. Absolutely.
Cheryl, the group of four was our budget committee and our two liaison members who have worked really just kind of alongside of both the city council and the commission in order to bring about some difficult conversations about things like transfer and so forth. So it's been a good group, productive, and I think really helpful over the last 3 years or so that we've kind of done that, 3 to 4, yeah.
It's working well for budget purposes, so I really appreciate that. After we get past those expenditures, so the 52% of our budget for purchase power transmission, 21%, that leaves us with roughly 25% of those revenues to operate the utility, so go out and do the day-to-day things we have to do, spend the money or spend and upgrade our system, replace our system, and things like that. So those we do with about 25% of that $45 million. So those are not easier pieces to put together, but smaller segments that we put together. Operating budgets, we just historically look at where we're at and adjust those for inflation and CPI and things like that. So those pieces need to come together too. On the water side, as I mentioned before, one of the components going into that would be the work being done by our consultant right now. So our water rate study, where we're taking an in-depth look at our revenue requirements, is how much money are we going to spend, and setting our rates to raise that amount of money. So that piece is in place right now on the water side. We did have our first look at that study, and we hope to be able to come back. Right now, from last year's budget process, we were projecting a 6.5% rate increase in water. We're hoping that we'll be able to soften that a little bit, and that the water rate study will help us, maybe even out those increases over the next several years to be something slightly less than 6.5%. So we'll be bringing those back to you there. Transfer payments to, the biggest expenditure on water side, so we're talking about $9 million of revenue on the water side. Undoubtedly, the biggest expenditure for that is actually two things. So capital improvements, so our water main replacement program, very capital intensive. That water main, or those capital items, take up about 27% of our budget. So 27% of that $9 million. Another roughly 27% of that budget goes for wages and salary and compensation, so a very labor-intensive process on the water side. The other remaining 45% covers chemicals, which is about 12% of the budget. City transfer is 6%, and then other operating expenses are about 25% there, so debt service another 10%. So not as many variables at this point or unknowns at this point when we put the water budget together. So we will have a little firmer handle on that when we go into our first budget meetings on that side.
Nancy, not meaning to jump into the weeds, because I know this is high level, but we established a schedule of rate increases last year with the budget. Do you
Yes.
anticipate us being able to hold to that schedule? As far as, what was it, 6.5?
On the water side, we've got, at budget time last year, we had 2 additional years at 6.5%.
Okay, that's right.
Rate increases, which to your normal residential water customer was about $1 a month increase.
Okay.
So we had a couple of years of 6.5s, and then we had some 3s and some 4s.
Okay.
So we will look at levelizing those out a little bit and seeing if we can't, drop down below that 6.5 just slightly by doing some levelizing. And probably some adjustments within the rate classes. So we have 4 different rate classes, and we'll look at how each of those classes is contributing to their share of the costs of the utility.
Always a big topic with a couple of those classes,
Yes, yes, yep.
our industrial users.
And, yep, so our classes are industrial, residential apartment complexes, or your multi-unit dwellings, apartments, and mobile home courts. And what's the 4th one? Commercial, smaller commercial then. So industrial and smaller and other commercial are our 2 kind of commercial categories there. I think I've hit on the challenges so that we'll be trying to put together. And what we'll do then is we will, let me go back and mention a couple more things on the water side. One of the requests, or one of the things we'll be asking you to take a look at on the water side as we go through the water rate study, and the budget committee earlier this year looked at it, would be to increase our reserves on the water division. So we're looking at approving an increase or a change to our financial strength policy and increasing reserves on the water side from about 180 days of cash on hand to 225 days of cash on hand. So more industry standard, in the range of Moody's, for where a water utility should be. And water revenues are more volatile than our electric, so we would like to have a little bit bigger buffer there too. So that will be one of the actions you'll see as we go through the budget process, would be an amended reserve policy that would allow a little bit more cash reserves on hand for the water utility.
Any questions for Nancy? This is just the beginning, so.
When did negotiations start with the labor unions? You said fall, but
We've gotten notice from both now, haven't we, or just the one?
Yeah, both of the labor contracts are in place through the end of December 2017, so they were 3-year agreements. Normally, about this time, we did receive notification from AFSCME, which is the clerical workers union. What they do is they file with the Bureau of Mediation Services saying, hey, we're ready to negotiate. So we've received that notification from them. I've communicated back with their business manager, let me know when you'd like to start that process. So we're waiting for a response back on that. On the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, I would expect to be hearing from them in the next few weeks.
Okay. Do you think those negotiations or hopefully would be done before we have to put a budget?
That would always be our goal.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of times, if I recall, a lot of times we're approving those labor contracts either real late in December. I recall having special meetings in December to get them approved. Sometimes they don't happen until January, February of the next year. So what we do budget-wise is we need to put a figure in there. And hope that it's close to where we're going to be able to negotiate those contracts at.
I would imagine that's going to be an item for one of our next couple of meetings then. Yep, okay.
have a closed session,
Yep.
discuss labor negotiation.
Okay. All righty. Anything else for Nancy? Thank you for the overview. Got some work to do?
We do, so, and
Yeah.
I look forward to working with the Budget Committee.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And they do an excellent job, Nancy does, and also
Mark.
Mark Moylan and our controller sitting in the back there
Lounging in the back.
does a lot of the work on this, so they both do an excellent job on this.
Good deal. Yeah. It's a good process. I've enjoyed it the last several years. And we'll pick up here again in a couple weeks. Upcoming meetings, we've already gone through the commission meetings for the rest of the year. We're good there. Meeting opportunities. I know there are some people traveling to Sioux Falls next week. I will not be able to go.
Okay.
So, so that one's off my list. But we've got a couple of, I think, members of City Council.
Yeah,
Heidi's
3.
going, and so we're well represented. And then Celebrate Public Power Week is coming up. So there must be plans. Dennis, that's on your shoulders. We'll look forward to hearing from you on that.
And we are looking to do some kind of an employee get-together so that, as you were suggesting, meeting all the employees would happen possibly during that week.
That'd be great.
And that'd be probably your first and best opportunity to do
Had a
that.
cookout, what, last year, the year before? Power Man showed up?
Last year.
Yeah, with the open house, we had a,
Yeah, burgers. Joe
Yeah.
was sweating over a hot grill. So, yeah. Might have to try doing that again.
yeah, no, that was good.
All right, anything else for the good of the order? Additional items? I think we're good. We don't need to go into closed session tonight, so with that, we are adjourned.